The altitude gauge flickered behind Jake's shoulder as he threw his head back, laughing, amber liquid sloshing in his glass. "Tell them about the hiking trip, babe. You know, the one where she couldn't even look over the edge of that tiny cliff?" Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. I kept my expression neutral, fingers wrapped around my wine glass, watching the ice cubes melt into perfect clarity. 6 pilots in my living room, 6 decorated commercial airline captains who flew millions of passengers across continents every year. 6 men who had no idea that the woman serving them imported cheese and crackers had logged more flight hours than all of them combined. "It was pathetic," Jake continued, his voice carrying that edge of affection mixed with condescension I'd grown to recognize. She literally sat down and crawled backward on her hands and knees. From a viewing platform, with railings, more laughter erupted around our oak dining table. Captain Marcus Chen nearly choked on his whiskey. Captain David Rodriguez slapped the table hard enough to rattle the Wedgwood plates. I'd purchased those plates in London 3 years ago, right after completing an emergency landing simulation at Heathrow that had impressed even the British Airways training instructors. "Come on, Jake," said Captain Sarah Mitchell, the only woman in the group besides me. She shot me a sympathetic look that somehow made it worse. Not everyone's comfortable with heights. It's actually a very common phobia. "Common?" Jake scoffed, refilling his glass from the bottle of Japanese whiskey I'd brought back from Tokyo. He didn't know I'd been there for a week-long advanced aerobatics training course. He thought I'd been visiting my college roommate. "She can't even go up the ladder to change light bulbs. I have to do everything that involves being more than 5 feet off the ground." I smiled weakly, playing the part I'd perfected over the past 4 years. The anxious wife. The grounded one. The woman who kept her feet firmly on the floor while her husband soared through the clouds, collecting stories and admiration in equal measure. "Must be tough," Captain Rodriguez said, but his eyes held that glint of superiority pilots sometimes got around civilians. "Being married to someone who lives in the sky when you can't stand heights. If only they knew. If only they could see the photograph tucked in my wallet, the one I never showed anyone. Me standing next to an FA-18 Super Hornet, helmet under my arm, the Persian Gulf stretching endless behind me. That was 7 years ago before I met Jake. Before I decided that maybe it was time to step back from the life that had consumed me since I was 18. Commander Elena Vasquez, United States Navy. Call sign, Raptor. 12 years of active service, 8 of them flying fighter jets off aircraft carriers. 273 carrier landings, each one a controlled fall onto a moving postage stamp in the middle of the ocean. I'd flown combat missions over 3 different theaters, earned a Distinguished Flying Cross, and trained the next generation of naval aviators before my honorable discharge 2 years ago. But Jake didn't know any of that. Nobody in this city knew that. When I met him at a mutual friend's barbecue, I'd been so tired of the weight of that life, the constant proving, the skepticism that still lingered even after I'd earned my place 10 times over. So when he'd asked what I did, I'd said I worked in logistics. It wasn't entirely a lie. I did work in aviation logistics now, consulting for private companies on safety protocols and emergency procedures. I just did it remotely, under an LLC, with enough layers of professional distance that Jake had never connected the dots. "Remember when we went to that rooftop bar in Chicago?" Jake was saying now, warming to his theme. His face was flushed from the alcohol and the attention. "She made us leave after 10 minutes because she couldn't handle being on the 40th floor. That rooftop bar had been at the Willis Tower. 40 floors. I'd flown missions at 40,000 feet, where the curvature of the earth became visible and the sky turned from blue to black. I'd performed barrel rolls and split-S maneuvers that would have made these commercial pilots reach for their sick bags. But that night in Chicago, I'd clutched Jake's arm and begged to leave because the wind was making me dizzy. Why? The question had haunted me more frequently lately. Why the charade? Why the diminishment? Elena's just cautious, Jake said, reaching over to pat my hand in a gesture that was probably meant to be comforting but felt patronizing. It's cute, really. Keeps me grounded. He laughed at his own pun. Captain Mitchell caught my eye again. There was something in her expression that made me wonder if she suspected something. Sarah was Sharp, one of the youngest captains at Continental Airways, known for her precision and her refusal to tolerate incompetence. She'd broken through enough barriers in the male-dominated aviation world to recognize another woman wearing a mask. So, Elena, Captain Chen asked, turning to me with polite interest. What do you do when Jake's away on long-haul flights? Must get lonely. I keep busy, I said softly. The practiced response. Reading, mostly. Some consulting work from home. Consulting? Captain Rodriguez perked up. What field? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, like this video, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Oh, just boring logistics stuff, I deflected, taking a sip of wine. Nothing interesting. Inventory management, supply chain optimization. Very dry material, Jake snorted. She's being modest. My wife is brilliant with numbers and systems. Could probably run an airline if she wanted to. He said it like a joke, like the idea was absurd. If only she could get on a plane without white-knuckling the armrests. The irony was exquisite. Just last month, I'd consulted on a crisis management protocol for a major cargo airline. They'd paid me $40,000 for 3 days of work, analyzing their emergency response procedures and recommending improvements based on my real-world experience with in-flight emergencies. The check had gone into my private account, the one Jake didn't know about, along with the rest of my consulting fees and my Navy pension. The white-knuckle thing is real, I said, playing along. I'm not good with turbulence. Captain Mitchell's eyes narrowed slightly. Something in my tone, maybe. Or the way I'd said turbulence with just a bit too much precision, like someone who understood the actual mechanics of it. You know what might help? Captain Chen suggested earnestly. A discovery flight. Small plane. Experienced instructor. Just 30 minutes or so. Sometimes exposure therapy works for phobias. Oh no, I said quickly, letting my voice rise with manufactured anxiety. I couldn't. Really. Even thinking about it makes me nervous. Jake laughed and pulled me closer, his arm heavy around my shoulders. See, that's my girl. Feet on the ground, that's where she's happy. The doorbell rang, saving me from having to continue the performance. That must be the catering delivery, I said, standing up smoothly. I'll get it. I walked through our foyer, past the framed photographs Jake had carefully curated. Him in his captain's uniform. Him standing in front of various aircraft. Him receiving his 747 type rating. A shrine to his aviation career, with me appearing in only 2 photos. Always standing slightly behind him. Always looking up at him with an expression of admiration that had become easier to fake as time went on. But it wasn't the caterer at the door. It was Captain Linda Reeves, and the moment I saw her face, everything inside me went cold and sharp and focused. Linda and I had served together. She'd been a transport pilot, flying C-130s, while I'd been in fighters. We'd crossed paths at various bases, shared drinks at the O Club, traded stories about the bureaucracy and the brotherhood and the singular rush of defying gravity for a living. She knew exactly who I was. What I was? Elena, she said, her voice carefully neutral, but her eyes were asking 1,000 questions. I hope I'm not late, Jake invited me last week when we ran into each other at the aviation conference. My mind raced. Jake had been at an aviation conference in Denver. He'd mentioned meeting some interesting people, expanding his network. He'd never mentioned Linda specifically, probably because he cataloged women pilots differently than men, less threatening to his sense of hierarchy. "Linda," I said, forcing brightness into my voice. "Of course, come in." We were just getting started. She stepped inside, and I caught the warning in her eyes. She wouldn't expose me, not without understanding why I was hiding. Linda had always been perceptive, always been someone who understood that everyone had their reasons for the masks they wore. "Everyone!" Jake called out as we entered the living room. "This is Captain Linda Reeves. She flies for FedEx now, but she used to be military. Marines, right, Linda?" "Navy," Linda corrected smoothly, her eyes meeting mine for just a fraction of a second. "Transport division. Nothing as glamorous as you passenger folks, but somebody's got to move the cargo." She was giving me an out, I realized. Playing down her military service, making it seem separate from anything I might have been involved in. "Linda, this is my wife Elena," Jake said, his arm snaking around my waist possessively. "I've told you about her." "The one with the height thing?" "Acrophobia," Linda said, nodding sympathetically. "It's more common than people think. I've known plenty of pilots who had to overcome it during training." "Really?" Jake seemed surprised. "I thought that would disqualify you." "Not at all," Linda said, accepting a glass of wine from me. Our fingers touched briefly as I handed it to her, and I felt the question in that contact. "What are you doing?" Fear of heights and fear of flying are actually different things. Plenty of excellent pilots don't like being on top of tall buildings. It's about control mostly. In an aircraft, you're in control. Standing on a cliff edge, you're not. It was a perfect explanation, delivered with the authority of experience. Captain Mitchell was nodding thoughtfully. Even Jake looked like he was reconsidering his mockery, though not enough to apologize. "Huh," Captain Rodriguez said. "Never thought about it that way." "So, Elena," Linda said, settling into the armchair across from me. "Jake tells me you work in logistics. What kind?" The trap was elegant. If I said aviation logistics, I'd have to demonstrate knowledge that would raise questions. If I said something else, I'd be lying to someone who knew the truth. "Supply chain management," I said carefully. "Pretty dry stuff. I mostly work with spreadsheets and databases." "Elena's being modest," Jake interjected. "She's actually really good at systems analysis. Sometimes I run scenarios by her, theoretical emergency situations, and she always has interesting insights. It's like she can visualize the whole operation, because I'd lived those emergencies, I thought. Because I'd been the one making split-second decisions at Mach 1.2 with my wingman's life depending on my next move. "That's a valuable skill," Linda said. Her tone was casual, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. She was trying to figure out my game, trying to understand why Commander Elena Vasquez, one of the most decorated fighter pilots of her generation, was playing house as a timid logistics consultant. "Speaking of scenarios," Captain Chen said, leaning forward with the enthusiasm of someone who'd had just enough whiskey to become philosophical. "Jake, did you ever tell them about that incident over the Pacific? The engine failure?" Jake's expression shifted, becoming more serious. This was his moment, I realized. The story he'd invited everyone to hear. The validation he needed. "It was 2 months ago," Jake began, his voice taking on that particular timbre pilots used when recounting their moments of glory. "Boeing 777, Tokyo to San Francisco, 312 passengers. We're 5 hours out over the ocean when the number 2 engine throws a compressor blade." I knew this story. He'd told me that night, his hand shaking slightly as he poured himself a drink. I'd held him, comforted him, told him how brave he'd been. I hadn't mentioned that I'd dealt with engine failures at supersonic speeds, or that the Pacific Ocean looked very different from the cockpit of a fighter jet than from a commercial airliner. The vibration was severe, Jake continued. We had to shut it down immediately. Single engine over water, nearest diversion airport 400 miles away. Jesus, Captain Rodriguez muttered. What was your fuel situation? Tight. We were at optimal cruise weight, but on one engine our fuel consumption increased significantly. Had to calculate whether we could make it to Midway or if we needed to consider a water landing scenario. The room had gone quiet. Even Captain Mitchell, who'd certainly faced her own emergencies, was listening intently. This was the communion of pilots, the sharing of the moments when training met crisis and you discovered what you were really made of. We ran the numbers 3 times, Jake said. Me and my first officer? The computer said we'd make Midway with about 20 minutes of fuel to spare. But that's assuming perfect conditions, no additional complications. What did you do? Captain Chen asked. We diverted. Declared an emergency, got priority handling, landed at Midway with 16 minutes of fuel remaining. Jake's voice carried pride and relief in equal measure. Passengers never knew how close it was. We kept them calm, told them it was a precautionary landing. But those last 30 minutes, he shook his head. That's when you remember why they pay us. That's textbook decision-making, Captain Mitchell said approvingly. You followed protocol, trusted your training, and brought everyone home safe. That's what matters. Jake glowed under her praise. This was what he needed, I realized with sudden clarity. Not me, not really. He needed an audience of his peers, people who understood the weight of 300 souls depending on your judgment. He needed validation from people who knew what it meant to have pick authority, pilot and command, the final word on everything that happened in that aircraft. I'd had that authority. I'd made decisions that affected not just passengers but national security, mission success, the lives of fellow service members. But I'd walked away from it, exhausted by the constant need to prove myself, tired of being the only woman in most of my ready rooms, weary of the way some men looked at me like I was a diversity hire instead of someone who'd earned my wings through the same brutal training as everyone else. Elena was amazing that night, Jake said suddenly, pulling me back into the conversation. When I got home, I was still pretty shaken up. She just listened, you know? Didn't try to fix anything, didn't tell me it was okay. Just let me process it. Because I'd been there, I thought. Because I knew exactly what that adrenaline crash felt like, when you'd held it together through the emergency and now, safe on the ground, your hands finally started shaking. That's important, Linda said, her eyes on me. Having someone who understands, or at least tries to. Elena tries, Jake said, squeezing my shoulder. Even if she doesn't really get the flying part, she gets the stress part, the responsibility part. That's what matters. The conversation drifted into technical discussions of engine failures, backup systems, decision trees for emergency scenarios. I listened and nodded at appropriate moments, playing the role of the supportive wife who was slightly out of her depth, but happy to be included. But I caught Linda watching me during a lull in the conversation. Her expression was thoughtful, almost sad. She'd known me in another life, when I was the one telling the war stories, when other pilots looked at me with respect and maybe a little envy. She'd seen me fly, had watched me trap on a carrier deck in a crosswind that had grounded half the air wing. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk. Private. Eli glanced up. Linda was looking at her own phone, face neutral. I gave the slightest nod. I'm going to step outside for a minute, Linda announced, standing up. Make a quick call, check on my daughter's soccer game. I'll join you, I said quickly. Need some air. All this aviation talk makes me nervous. I added a self-deprecating laugh that made Jake smile indulgently. We stepped out onto the back deck, the cool evening air a relief after the warm stuffiness of the living room. Below us, the city lights spread out like a constellation, and I allowed myself a moment to remember how much more beautiful they looked from 30,000 feet. "Raptor," Linda said softly, using my old call sign. "What the hell are you doing?" I leaned against the railing, looking out at the darkness. "Living a different life." "By pretending to be afraid of heights? By hiding who you are?" Linda's voice was sharp with frustration. "Do you know how many young women in the Navy looked up to you? You were proof that we could make it, that we could fly fighters and be respected for our skills." I got tired, Linda. "Of what? Flying?" "Of fighting." The words came out harder than I'd intended. "Of every single day being a battle to prove I deserved to be there. Of watching less qualified men get promoted because they fit the profile better. Of being called a diversity hire behind my back even after I'd logged more combat hours than most of the squadron combined." Linda was quiet for a moment. "Is that why you left?" "Partly. Also partly because I wanted something normal. A relationship where I didn't have to be Commander Vasquez first and Elena second. A life where I could just be." "And how's that working out?" Linda gestured toward the house, where Jake's laughter carried through the windows. "He mocks you in front of his friends. He thinks you're fragile. Is that really better?" The question hit harder than I wanted to admit. "He doesn't know any better. I never told him. Why not?" I turned to face her. "Because the first 3 men I dated after making commander only saw the rank and the career. They wanted a trophy, someone impressive they could show off. Or they wanted me to finance their dreams while they figured themselves out. When I met Jake, I was so tired of all of it. So I told him I was just a consultant, someone ordinary. And he fell in love with that version of me." "But that's not you," Linda insisted. "The real Elena Vasquez doesn't cringe at heights. She doesn't need her husband to change light bulbs. She sure as hell doesn't sit quietly while he and his buddies laugh about her supposed weakness." Maybe the real Elena Vasquez was tired of being her, I said quietly. Linda studied me for a long moment. "You know what I think? I think you're testing him, seeing how he treats someone he perceives as weaker, less accomplished. And from what I'm seeing in there, he's failing that test." Before I could respond, the door opened and Captain Mitchell stepped out. "Everything okay?" she asked, looking between us. "Fine," I said quickly. "Just catching up. Linda and we met briefly years ago. Small world." Sarah Mitchell's sharp eyes missed nothing. "Where did you two meet?" "A conference," Linda said smoothly. "Aviation logistics. Elena was consulting on some supply chain optimization project." It wasn't entirely a lie. I had consulted on aviation projects, just not in the way they imagined. "Right," Sarah said slowly, but something in her expression told me she didn't quite believe it. "Jake's looking for you, Elena. Wants to show everyone the video from his engine failure incident. Got it from the cockpit camera." We filed back inside, and Jake was already setting up his laptop, connecting it to the large TV on the wall. The other pilots gathered around, professional interest clear on their faces. This was the pilot version of studying game tape, learning from each other's experiences. "Fair warning," Jake said as the video loaded. "The audio gets pretty intense. You might want to cover your ears, babe." He said it casually, throwaway consideration for his wife's delicate sensibilities. But I saw Linda's jaw tighten beside me. The video started. The cockpit of a 777, the vast instrument panel, the view through the windscreen of empty sky and ocean. Everything looked routine. Then suddenly a violent shudder. Alarms began blaring. Jake's voice controlled but tight. "Engine 2 failure. Securing engine 2. I watched the hands on screen moving through the checklist, the first officer reading responses, both pilots working together with practiced efficiency. It was good flying, professional, and by the book. Jake had handled it exactly as he should have, but I'd seen so much worse. I'd had engine fires at supersonic speeds. I'd had hydraulic failures during carrier approaches. I'd been shot at, had missiles tracking me, had to make decisions in split seconds that meant the difference between life and death, not just for me, but for my wingman, my strike package, sometimes civilians on the ground, and I couldn't say any of that. Couldn't share those experiences. Couldn't even ask the technical questions that were occurring to me, like why they hadn't activated the enhanced engine monitoring system earlier, or whether they'd considered the thermal stress on the remaining engine during the extended single-engine operation. Textbook, Captain Rodriguez said appreciatively when the video ended with the aircraft safely on the ground at Midway. You and your FO made all the right calls. It's what we train for, Jake said, but he was glowing with pride. But theory and practice are different animals. When it's real, when you've got people counting on you, he glanced at me. That's when you find out who you really are. Indeed, Linda said, her voice dry. That moment of truth. When you discover what you're truly capable of. Jake didn't catch the double meaning, but I did. So did Captain Mitchell, whose eyes flickered to me with renewed interest. I think we should toast, Captain Chen declared, raising his glass. To Jake for keeping his cool under pressure. And to all of us who've been there, who know what it means to have people's lives in our hands. Glasses clinked. They drank. I sipped my wine and tasted ashes. You know what we should do? Captain Rodriguez said suddenly, clearly inspired by alcohol and camaraderie. We should take Elena up sometime. Gentle flight, smooth conditions. Show her that flying isn't scary. Oh, I don't think, I started. No, he's right, Jake interrupted enthusiastically. Exposure therapy. We could take my club's Cessna, do a sunrise flight, really calm and beautiful. Maybe you'd see why I love it so much. I don't know, I said weakly, even as part of me wanted to laugh at the image. Them, thinking they'd be introducing me to the wonders of flight. Me, having logged more hours in higher performance aircraft than most of them would see in their entire careers. Come on, honey, Jake pressed. For me, I'd love to share this with you. And you'd be safe. I'd be right there. The condescension in that last statement nearly broke my composure. I'd kept myself and others safe through situations he couldn't imagine. And he thought I needed him to protect me in a Cessna 172. Let her think about it, Captain Mitchell interjected. And there was something in her voice that made Jake back off. Sarah had authority, the kind that came from being undeniably competent in a field that still struggled with gender equality. When she spoke, even the men listened. Of course, Jake said. No pressure. Just think it'd be nice. The party continued. More stories, more drinks, more laughter. I played my part, smiling and nodding, refilling glasses and clearing plates. The perfect hostess, the supportive wife, the woman who knew her place on the ground while the real aviators did the important work in the sky. But Linda's words stayed with me. You're testing him, was I? Or was I just hiding, taking the easier path, letting him underestimate me because it was simpler than facing the truth? That I'd walked away from a career I'd loved because staying was slowly crushing me. And now I was in a relationship where I had to hide the most fundamental part of who I was. Around 11, people started making motions to leave. Early flights tomorrow, training sessions, check rides, the rituals of professional pilots. Jake was in his element, walking everyone to the door, promising to set up another gathering soon. Linda was the last to leave. At the door, she pressed her business card into my hand. Call me, she said quietly, pitching her voice under Jake's farewell to Captain Chen. We should catch up properly. Talk about old times. I nodded, slipping the card into my pocket. Finally, everyone was gone. The house fell into quiet, just the sound of the dishwasher humming and Jake loosening his tie. "That went great," he said, pulling me into a hug. "Everyone loved you. And I think they felt kind of bad about the height jokes after seeing how sweet you were about it all. Sweet, like I was a child who'd been patient during the grown-ups' conversation. I'm glad you had fun," I said, which was true enough. He had enjoyed himself. That mattered, even if it left a bitter taste in my mouth. "You know," Jake said, pouring himself a nightcap, "Rodriguez might be right. Maybe we should try that flight. Start slow, build up your confidence. I'd really love to share that part of my life with you." I looked at him, this man I'd married, this man who thought he knew me. He was handsome in his pilot's uniform, confident in his abilities, proud of his career. He wasn't a bad person. He hadn't set out to diminish me. He just didn't know what he was diminishing. "Maybe," I said softly. "Let me think about it." That night, lying in bed while Jake snored softly beside me, I pulled out Linda's card. But I also pulled out something else from my bedside drawer, my military ID card. Long expired but still carrying my rank and designation, Commander Elena R. Vasquez, USN Naval Aviator. I'd earned every letter of those titles. Every commendation, every qualification, every hour in the air. I'd been good. Better than good. I'd been exceptional, and I'd walked away from it, thinking I could become someone else, someone simpler, someone who didn't carry the weight of all those expectations and battles. But you can't just stop being who you are. You can hide it, bury it, pretend it doesn't exist. But it's still there under the surface, waiting. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I meant what I said. "We should talk. You deserve better than this." Linda, another text came through immediately after, this one from an unknown sender. "Commander Vasquez, this is Captain Sarah Mitchell. I did some checking after tonight. We need to talk. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., Blackstone Cafe. Please come." My heart raced. Sarah had figured it out. Somehow she'd connected the dots, seen through my careful facade. A third text. "And bring your badge. I want to see it." I stared at the message for a long time. Tomorrow, 10 a.m., a reckoning of sorts. Beside me, Jake shifted in his sleep, threw his arm across my waist. He was dreaming, probably of flying, of clear skies and perfect landings. Dreaming of a world where he was the pilot and I was the passenger, where his strength complemented my weakness, where everything made simple sense. But nothing was simple. Nothing had ever been simple. I looked at my old military ID again, at the woman in that photo. She looked back at me with calm, steady eyes. Fighter pilot eyes. Commander's eyes. Eyes that had seen combat and crisis and had never flinched. "What are you doing?" those eyes seemed to ask. "Who are you trying to be?" I didn't have an answer. Not yet. But maybe tomorrow, at 10 a.m., I'd start figuring it out. I put the ID back in the drawer, turned off the light, and lay in the darkness, listening to Jake's peaceful breathing and wondering what would happen when I finally stopped pretending to be afraid of heights. The Blackstone Cafe sat in a quiet corner of downtown, the kind of place where business people held discreet meetings over overpriced coffee. I arrived at 9:45 a.m., 15 minutes early out of habit. Military training never really left you. Early is on time is late. Captain Sarah Mitchell was already there, sitting at a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Also military training, I noted. She saw me and raised her hand slightly. I walked over, my heart hammering against my ribs. In my purse, wrapped in a small leather case, was my military ID and my badge from the Navy. The Distinguished Flying Cross Medal was there too, though I hadn't planned on bringing it. At the last minute, something had compelled me to grab it. Commander Vasquez, Sarah said as I sat down. Not Elena. Commander. Just Elena now, I replied quietly. I've been out for 2 years. Honorable discharge? Yes. A server came by and I ordered coffee, black. Sarah waited until the server left before speaking again. I couldn't sleep last night after the party, she said. Something about you bothered me. The way you held yourself, the way you spoke about turbulence with too much precision. And then Linda Reeves shows up, and I saw her body language around you. Recognition, respect, the kind pilots give each other. I said nothing, just waited. So I made some calls, Sarah continued. I know people in the Navy aviation community. Asked about an Elena Vasquez who might have served around the same time as Linda. Do you know what they told me? I can imagine. They told me about Raptor, about a commander who flew FA-18s off carriers, about someone who had 273 carrier traps, about a pilot who saved her wingman's life during a mission over hostile territory by providing cover fire while he ejected, then escorted his position until rescue arrived despite having taken damage herself. Sarah's voice was low, intense. They told me about one of the best damn fighter pilots the Navy has produced in the last decade. I looked down at my coffee. That was a different life, was it? Sarah leaned forward. Because that woman I saw last night, playing scared and timid while your husband made jokes, that wasn't a different life. That was a lie. The words stung because they were true. Why? Sarah asked. Why hide it? Why let him treat you like that? I took a breath. When I got out, I was exhausted. Tired of fighting for respect every single day. Tired of being the only woman in the room and having to be twice as good to be considered half as competent. I wanted something normal. When I met Jake, I thought, maybe I could just be a regular person. Not Commander Vasquez, just Elena. And how's that working out? You saw last night. Sarah nodded slowly. He has no idea who you are. And because of that, he doesn't respect you. He loves a version of you that doesn't exist. Maybe that version is easier to love, I said quietly. Or maybe you chose a man who could only love someone he perceived as weaker than himself. Sarah's words were harsh but not unkind. Elena, I've been the only woman captain at my airline for 3 years. I know what it's like to constantly prove yourself. But hiding who you are, that's not rest. That's erasure. I pulled out my military ID and placed it on the table between us. Sarah picked it up, studied the photo, the rank, the designation. Fighter pilot, she said softly. Jesus! And your husband thinks you're afraid of heights. It seemed easier. Easier for who? Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. A text from Jake. Hey babe, heading to the simulator for recurrent training. Home around 6, love you, Sarah saw me looking at the phone. Does he know you're here? I told him I had a meeting with a potential consulting client. More lies to maintain the illusion. Sarah slid the ID back to me. What are you going to do? I don't know. Well, I know what I'm going to do, Sarah said firmly. There's an air show next month at Riverside Regional. They're looking for civilian pilots to participate in formation flying demonstrations. I've already signed up. I think you should too. I stared at her. I can't. Why not? You're qualified. Overqualified, actually. You've done formation flying in combat conditions? This would be a cakewalk for you. Jake would find out. Yes, Sarah said simply. He would. And maybe that's exactly what needs to happen. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Linda. Coffee tomorrow? I have a proposal for you. Sarah saw my expression. What is it? Linda wants to meet. Good. Listen to her. Listen to me. Stop hiding, Elena. You earned your wings. You earned your rank. You earned respect through blood and sweat and skill. Don't throw all that away because some man needs you to be smaller so he can feel bigger. We sat in silence for a moment. The cafe bustled around us, people living their ordinary lives, unaware of the crisis unfolding at our corner table. "Can I ask you something?" I said finally. "How do you do it? Stay in aviation, deal with the sexism, and not burn out?" Sarah smiled, but it was edged with weariness. "I pick my battles. I have a support network of other women pilots, and I remember that every flight I command, I'm proving to some little girl watching that she can do this too. That keeps me going. I used to think that way," I admitted. "But after 12 years, I just ran out of fight. Then maybe you needed the rest. But rest and hiding aren't the same thing. Rest is temporary. You recharge and then you get back up." Sarah finished her coffee. "The question is, are you ready to get back up?" Was I? I thought about last night, sitting quietly while Jake and his friends laughed about my supposed weaknesses. I thought about all the small moments over 4 years where I'd bitten my tongue, played dumb, pretended to be someone I wasn't. "I need to talk to Jake," I said. "Yes, you do. And Elena?" Sarah stood up, preparing to leave. "Bring the badge when you talk to him. Let him see who you really are. If he can't handle it, if he can't respect it, then you have your answer about whether this marriage is worth saving." She left, and I sat alone with my coffee and my thoughts and the weight of the ID in my purse. I met Linda the next day at a small restaurant near the airport. She was already there, watching planes take off through the window with the wistful expression pilots got when they were grounded. "Thanks for coming," she said as I sat down. "I wasn't sure you would." I wasn't sure either. Linda got straight to the point. "I'm starting a consulting firm. Aviation safety, emergency protocol training, that kind of thing. I want you to partner with me." I blinked. "What?" "Elena, you're wasting your talents doing whatever half-assed remote consulting you're doing now. You have real expertise, real experience. There are airlines, charter companies, even military contractors who would pay serious money for the kind of insights you can provide." Linda leaned forward, "And it would be under our names. Our company. No more hiding behind LLCs and anonymous contracts." "Linda, I can't." "Why not? And don't tell me it's because of Jake. Your husband doesn't own you. He doesn't get to dictate whether you use your skills and experience. It's not that simple." "It is exactly that simple. You're choosing to make it complicated." Linda's voice softened. "Look, I get it. After you left the service, you wanted peace. You wanted to be with someone who didn't know Commander Vasquez, who wouldn't have preconceptions or expectations. But you went too far in the other direction. You created someone so different from who you really are that you can't sustain it. You sound like Sarah. Sarah Mitchell? You talked to her?" "She figured it out. Made some calls. Confronted me yesterday." Linda grinned. "I like her already. Smart woman." "What did she say?" "Basically what you're saying. That I'm hiding instead of resting. That Jake can't respect someone he doesn't really know." She's right. So here's my proposal. Partner with me. Build something real. And tell your husband the truth. All of it. Linda pulled out a folder. "I've already drawn up preliminary business plans. We could be operational in 3 months. I've got contacts at 6 major airlines already interested in our services." I looked through the papers. It was impressive, thorough, professional. Linda had clearly been thinking about this for a while. "Why me?" I asked. "You could partner with any number of qualified people." "Because you're the best pilot I've ever known," Linda said simply. "And because watching you pretend to be afraid of heights makes me want to punch something." "You're better than this, Elena. You deserve better than this." I thought about my conversation with Sarah, about the air show next month, about Jake coming home every day to a wife who didn't exist. "I need some time," I said, "to think, to figure out how to tell Jake." "Take the time." "But Elena?" Linda met my eyes. Don't take too long. Life's short. Don't spend it pretending to be someone you're not. That evening, Jake came home from his simulator session energized and happy. Nailed my check ride, he announced, kissing me. Perfect score on the emergency procedures. That's great, I said and meant it. Whatever else was true, I did want him to succeed, to be good at his job, to find fulfillment in his career. Hey, so I was thinking, Jake said, loosening his tie. That flight I mentioned, taking you up in the Cessna? I talked to the club, and we could go this Saturday. Perfect weather forecasted, smooth conditions. What do you say? This was it. The moment where I could either continue the charade or start dismantling it. Jake, we need to talk. Something in my tone made him pause. That sounds serious. It is. Sit down. We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where his friends had laughed about my supposed acrophobia 2 nights ago. I pulled out my military ID and placed it between us. Jake picked it up, confused. What's this? It's me. The real me. He looked at the ID, at the rank, at the designation. I don't understand. This says commander. This says naval aviator. Because that's what I was. For 12 years. I flew FA-18 Super Hornets off aircraft carriers. I had 273 carrier landings. I flew combat missions in 3 different theaters. I earned a Distinguished Flying Cross. The words came out steady, calm. And I'm not afraid of heights, Jake. I've never been afraid of heights. The silence stretched between us. Jake's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then something harder to read. This is a joke, he said finally. Did Linda put you up to this? Some kind of prank? It's not a joke. Linda Reeves and I served together. She recognized me at your party. So did Sarah Mitchell, though it took her a little longer. Sarah, but she... Jake stopped, his mind clearly racing. No, this doesn't make sense. You told me you worked in logistics. You said you'd never been in the military. You're afraid of flying, of heights, of... I lied, I said quietly. About all of it. Why? The word came out almost strangled. Why would you lie about something like that? Because I was tired, Jake. Tired of the fight, tired of constantly proving myself. When I met you, I wanted to be someone different. Someone simpler. Someone who didn't carry all that weight. So you just... What? Made up a whole different person? Jake's voice was rising now. You've been lying to me for 4 years? Our entire relationship is based on a lie? Not entirely. My feelings for you were real. Are real? But everything else? The scared, timid woman who needs me to protect her? That was all fake. Jake stood up, pacing. Jesus Christ, Elena. Or should I call you Commander? I don't even know who you are. I'm both, I said. I'm the woman who fell in love with you, and I'm the pilot who earned her wings through blood and sweat. I'm not one or the other. I'm both. You let me make a fool of myself. Jake's anger was building now. All those times I tried to comfort you about flying, tried to help you with your phobia, and you were laughing at me the whole time, weren't you? Thinking how stupid I was? No, I never thought you were stupid. I didn't know how to tell you. The longer it went on, the harder it became. You didn't know how to tell me? Jake's laugh was bitter. How about, hey Jake, I used to fly fighter jets. That would have been a good start. Any time in the last 4 years would have been fine. Would it? I stood up now too, meeting his anger with my own rising frustration. Would you have been okay with it? With me being more qualified than you, having more flight hours, higher rank? Would your ego have survived that? My ego. This isn't about my ego. Isn't it? You loved having a wife who looked up to you, who thought you were amazing for flying a 777. You loved feeling superior, more capable, stronger. Would you have wanted me if you'd known I'd done everything you've done and more? The question hung in the air between us. Jake's face flushed red. "That's not fair," he said. "Maybe not. But it's true, isn't it? At the party, you loved showing off in front of me, making jokes about my weakness, feeling like the strong one, the capable one. If I'd been Commander Vasquez from the start, would you have even been interested? I don't know," Jake admitted, and there was something broken in his voice. "I don't know because you never gave me the chance to find out. You made that decision for both of us." He was right. I had made that decision. I'd assumed he couldn't handle the truth, so I'd hidden it. In doing so, I'd robbed him of the choice and myself of authenticity. "You're right," I said quietly. "I should have told you from the beginning. I was wrong to lie." "I'm sorry." Jake sat back down, his head in his hands. "I need to think. I need time to process this. I understand. Do you? Because I feel like I don't understand anything right now. My whole world just flipped upside down. The woman I thought I married doesn't exist. And the woman sitting in front of me is a stranger. I'm not a stranger, Jake. I'm still the person who holds you when you come home from difficult flights. I'm still the person who listens to your stories, who supports your career, who loves you. But you're also someone who lied to me every single day for 4 years. Someone who let me make a fool of myself and my friends. Someone who I don't actually know at all." There was nothing I could say to that. It was true. Jake stood up. "I'm going to stay at a hotel tonight. I need space. Jake? Please, Elena, Commander, whoever you are, just give me time." He left, and I heard the door close, his car start, the sound of him driving away. I sat alone in our kitchen, the military ID still on the table, and wondered if I'd just destroyed my marriage by finally telling the truth. The next few days passed in a blur. Jake stayed at a hotel. We texted occasionally, brief messages about logistics and practical matters. He needed time. I gave it to him. Linda called every day. "Come work with me," she said. "Whether or not things work out with Jake, you need this. You need to be yourself again," Sarah texted. "The airshow registration closes in a week. I put your name down. Ball's in your court." I spent a lot of time thinking about who I was, about who I'd been, about who I wanted to be. On the 4th day, Jake came home. He looked tired, older somehow. "We need to talk," he said. We sat in the living room this time, neutral territory. "I've been thinking a lot," Jake began. "About us, about what you told me, about everything. And I talked to someone, a therapist, professional perspective. Okay, she helped me see some things I didn't want to see, about myself, about how I treated you." Jake took a breath. "You asked if I would have been interested in you if I'd known the truth from the start. I've been asking myself that same question. And honestly, I don't know. Maybe not. And that says something pretty ugly about me." I stayed quiet, letting him work through it. "I liked feeling superior," he admitted. "I liked being the pilot, the one with the impressive career. I liked having a wife who looked up to me, who needed me. And yeah, that's about my ego. That's about my own insecurities." "Jake, let me finish, please." He looked at me, really looked at me. "What you did was wrong. Lying to me, hiding who you were, that was wrong. But I created an environment where you felt like you had to hide, where being accomplished and capable was somehow threatening to me. And that's on me." "We both made mistakes," I said. "Yeah, but here's the thing. I don't know if I can get past the lying. I don't know if I can trust you again, and I don't know if I can handle being with someone who's more successful, more accomplished than me. I wish I was a bigger person. I wish I could say none of that matters. But I'd be lying." My heart sank. I'd known this was coming, but hearing it still hurt. "So what are you saying?" "I think we need to separate. Maybe divorce. I don't know yet. But I can't keep going the way things were. And I don't know if I can move forward knowing the truth." Does that make sense? It did. Painful as it was, it made perfect sense. I understand, I said. And Jake? I really am sorry. For lying, for wasting your time, for all of it. I'm sorry too, for making you feel like you had to be small, for not being the kind of man who could handle being with someone extraordinary. He gave a sad smile. Because you are extraordinary, Elena. Commander Vasquez. Raptor. Whatever name you use, you're extraordinary. You deserve someone who celebrates that, not someone who needs you to hide it. He moved out that weekend. We agreed to trial separation, see how we felt in a few months, but we both knew it was over. You can't build a marriage on lies, but you also can't save one where the truth is too threatening to bear. 2 weeks later, I signed the partnership papers with Linda, Reeves and Vasquez Aviation Consulting. Our names, our credentials, our expertise. No more hiding. Sarah convinced me to do the air show. Think of it as your coming out party, she said. Let the aviation world know that Raptor is back. The day of the air show, I stood on the tarmac in my flight suit, the one I'd kept in the back of my closet, unable to throw it away. It still fit. The muscle memory was still there. The confidence, the clarity, the focus that came from being in my element. Jake showed up. I saw him in the crowd watching the pre-flight briefing. We'd agreed to be civil, to work toward an amicable divorce. He'd been professional about it all, even decent. When he saw me in my flight suit, saw the other pilots treating me with respect and deference, saw me climbing into the cockpit of the extra 300 aerobatic plane, his face went through a series of emotions I couldn't quite read. The flight was perfect. Formation flying with Sarah and 2 other civilian pilots, precise and synchronized. Then my solo routine. Loops, rolls, hammerheads, all the maneuvers I'd learned in the military and hadn't performed in 2 years. The crowd roared. The announcer talked about my military service, my combat experience, my decorations. Commander Elena Raptor Vasquez was back. After landing, Jake found me. That was incredible, he said. I had no idea. I mean, I knew you'd been military, but seeing it? Actually seeing you fly? Elena, that was incredible. Thank you. I get it now. Why you walked away from this. The pressure of being that good, being that visible. And I'm sorry I made things worse. I'm sorry you felt like you couldn't share this part of yourself with me. We both have things to be sorry for, I said gently. Yeah, but for what it's worth, I'm proud of you, for getting back up here, for being yourself again. We hugged and it felt like goodbye, a real one this time. Not angry or bitter, just sad and accepting. 6 months later, Reeves and Vasquez Aviation Consulting was thriving. We had contracts with 3 major airlines and 2 military contractors. I was flying again, training again, living again. I was myself again. Sarah became a close friend. We'd fly together on weekends, push each other, challenge each other. She introduced me to her network of women aviators, pilots, and controllers and engineers, all of us fighting the same fight, supporting each other through it. The divorce was finalized. Jake moved to Seattle for a new position with Alaska Airlines. We exchanged brief texts on birthdays and holidays, cordial, civil. We'd both moved on. I dated occasionally. It was different now. I didn't hide. First date conversation included my military service, my career, my accomplishments. Some men were intimidated, some weren't interested. That was fine. I wasn't interested in men who needed me to be smaller, and then I met Daniel. He was an engineer, civilian, had never been in the military. He designed wind turbines. When I told him I used to fly fighter jets, he lit up with genuine enthusiasm. That's amazing. Tell me everything. What's it like landing on a carrier? How do you handle the G-forces in combat maneuvers? Do you miss it? He asked questions not to diminish but to understand. He was proud of my accomplishments, not threatened by them. He introduced me to his friends as Elena. She used to fly F-18s in the Navy. Not to show off, but because he thought it was genuinely cool. On our 5th date, he asked if I'd take him flying sometime. Absolutely, I said. Fair warning, I'm probably going to do some acrobatics. I'm counting on it. We flew together and he loved every minute of it, even when I did a barrel roll that had him gripping the armrests and laughing with exhilaration. You're incredible, he said after we landed, his hair wild from the helmet, his face flushed with adrenaline. That was the most amazing thing I've ever experienced. I'm just getting started, I promised. A year later, we got engaged. At the engagement party, surrounded by friends and family, Daniel gave a toast. Most people know Elena as a brilliant aviation consultant. Some of you know her as a former naval commander? But I know her as the woman who taught me that the sky isn't a limit. It's a beginning. She's taught me about courage, about being authentic, about reaching for something bigger than yourself. And I can't wait to spend the rest of my life watching her fly. People applauded. Linda wiped away tears. Sarah raised her glass with a knowing smile. And I stood there, finally fully myself, no longer hiding or diminishing or pretending. Just me. Commander Elena Vasquez, Raptor, pilot, consultant, partner, woman who had learned the hard way that you can't build a life on lies, but you also can't find real love until you're willing to show your true self. The sky was waiting. It always had been. I just needed to remember that I belonged there. Jake sent me a message that night. Saw the engagement announcement. Congratulations. He seems like a good guy. Better than me, probably. I hope you're happy. I hope you're flying. You deserve to, I wrote back. Thank you. I am happy. I am flying. I hope you're well, and I meant it. Jake had been part of my journey, even the difficult parts. He'd helped me realize what I didn't want, what I wouldn't accept. That was valuable too. Sometimes you have to lose yourself to find yourself again. Sometimes you have to hide to understand why you should never hide. And sometimes you have to let go of who you thought you should be to become who you actually are. I was Commander Elena Vasquez. I was Raptor. I was a fighter pilot, a consultant, a partner, a friend. And I was done being afraid. Not of heights. Not of truth. Not of being fully, completely, unapologetically myself. The sky was calling. It always would be. And this time, I was ready to answer. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.